Prosecutors in New Mexico have just filed criminal charges in the 2021 deadly shooting on the set of the film Rust. Actor Alec Baldwin is now charged with involuntary manslaughter. The actor fired the prop gun that killed cinematographer Halyna Hutchins. Baldwin has denied any wrongdoing.
Let's bring in CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson to talk about this. So, Jessica, what are the penalties for these charges as you understand them?
Penalties are up to 18 months in prison and probation. So this is a fourth felony offense. And what we're talking about here is not an intentional killing. I think that's the key for people to understand. We're talking about a potentially lawful act that you engage in, but you were criminally negligent. So for instance, if you go shooting with friends and you are not holding a gun properly and you're not taking due care and you should have known that something dangerous could have happened and you accidentally kill a friend, you can be charged with this involuntary manslaughter. And that's what we're basically seeing in this case.
And I just want to sort of clarify, Alec Baldwin was holding the gun at the time. That is what we know. Alec Baldwin has said that, in fact, at one point he said he did not fire the gun. So, these are details that will be worked out, as this case grinds forward. But I just wanted to sort of clarify, he was holding the gun at the time. Whether he's firing it or not is for other people to determine.
Well, and apparently a forensics accounting determined that, in fact, he had to have pulled the trigger. He said, no, I didn't. As you absolutely correctly identified, that will be an issue in trial. He'll say, I would never pull the gun. But this forensic report indicates that the gun would not have fired if it weren't pulled. Again, it's going to be one of the issues that, assuming this actually does go before a jury, that they're going to have to sort out, because as far as we can see from the reporting, there never has been the full explanation for how live ammunition landed in that gun that Alec Baldwin ultimately had in his hand, which led to a death.
All right, Jessica, stand by for just a moment. Let's bring in CBS News correspondent Kris Van Cleave, who's joining us now from, I believe, New Mexico. So, Kris, the news is just out this morning. Alec Baldwin is being charged with involuntary manslaughter. What more can you tell us?
Sure. So Baldwin and Halyna Gutierrez-Reed, the armorer, have been charged with 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter for the shooting that killed the cinematographer Halyna Hutchins. Now, there are 2 statutes for involuntary manslaughter in New Mexico, according to the DA's office here, and that's why there are 2 charges here. They're going to be charged in the alternative, which means the jury, if it goes to trial, will be able to decide which caliber or category of involuntary homicide they want to look at here. And the difference is, as you were hearing, an 18-month sentence. There's another category, a more severe one, that because it was committed with a gun could carry a sentence of up to 5 years in prison. But most immediately here, the charges will be filed formally before the end of the month, the DA says. That will then prompt a summons for both Baldwin and Gutierrez-Reed, and that will begin the formal legal process. There'll be a first appearance and then a preliminary hearing, which will sort of take the place of a grand jury here, because due to COVID restrictions, a judge will essentially act as a grand jury to decide if there's enough evidence to go forward here. Should also note that Assistant Director David Halls, who basically inspected the gun before it was given to Baldwin on the day of the shooting, he assigned a plea agreement to the charge of negligent use of a deadly weapon. That includes a suspended sentence of 6 months and probation. We may see a copy of that agreement here later today. It's got to be filed with the court. So several steps yet to come. There will be no charges specifically to the non-fatal shooting of the director, Joel Souza. But again, you've got Baldwin and the armorer here, the 2 people that would have had the most responsibility for this firearm, seeing criminal charges being filed, and then you've got a guilty plea in this case as well now.
Jessica, we know that Alec Baldwin has already sort of agreed to a civil settlement in this case. Will that have an impact on the criminal case?
The DA's office has said previously it will have no impact whatsoever. And he actually, in another case, has filed a counterclaim where he has said, I'm not responsible. Other people are responsible. I'm filing this counterclaim to clear my name. I did nothing criminally wrong. I did nothing civilly wrong. And so, yes, there has been a settlement. The DA has been very clear that that will have no bearing. I don't think that the jury will hear about that. It obviously will depend on what happens in terms of evidentiary hearings as we move forward in that case. But there's another civil case, as I mentioned, where Alec Baldwin is actually trying to clear his name by using a civil court. And so if that settlement comes in, then he's going to want his counterclaim and that suit and whatever happens in that suit to come in as well.
So, Jessica, since I'm not a lawyer, these criminal charges, does it have to go to trial?
No, it doesn't have to go to trial. And as you just heard in the reporting, there are a lot of steps before we get to a jury. There's going to be initial hearings. There will be an initial determination. I think that's very important by a judge, because in New Mexico, because of COVID restrictions, it will be done by a judge who will make a determination as to whether or not there's enough evidence to even move forward. At every step along the way, Alec Baldwin, if there is a plea deal on the table, Alec Baldwin can consider a plea deal. So all of these things would happen before you get to a trial. Ultimately, then, if the case does go to trial, all of these issues will be before the jury. But we're a very long ways from even determining whether or not this will ever be heard by a jury. And if so, which charges will ultimately be brought. What we also heard is that there are these 2 charges of involuntary manslaughter. It's entirely possible that a judge, in making that kind of gatekeeping determination as to whether or not there's enough evidence to go forward, will say yes on this charge, but no on that charge.
And then to that sort of point, could a judge also say, maybe not sort of in this language, but, 60% of the responsibility goes over here, and, another 40%, or 10 versus 90. And could that have an impact on the outcome of the case, or even like sentencing?
That's a great question. Those specific kind of allocations of fault are typically seen more often in a civil case. When it comes to the criminal case, what you'd be looking at is, as we've seen now, 2 different statutes. Obviously, it's breaking news. We're just hearing this. 2 different statutes under which there will be charges of involuntary manslaughter. And what the jury really needs to determine is whether or not the actions that were taken, or frankly, in this case, actions that were not taken as well, the failure to engage in due diligence in inspecting these guns, whether or not that rises to the level of involuntary manslaughter under New Mexico state statute. So I don't think those differences in the allocation of fault would come in at this point.
So, Kris, let me ask you, and this is a minor detail in the grand scheme of things, but my guess is that the movie Rust will never see the light of day.
Well, not to interject, but I am doing that. But part of the civil settlement had, Halyna Hutchins' husband participating. I think he was going to be an executive producer or something along those lines, Kris?
That's correct. Part of the civil settlement was that he would join the executive producer ranks, and they in theory are supposed to be resuming filming this month. Hutchins' widow said he felt that this was a tribute to her legacy as a cinematographer. So it is possible that Rust does get made.
Wow. And so then I guess,
I should say.
What do we know about, Kris, what happens next in this process, in this legal process? Do we have a timeline? Any details you can give us?
We have a loose timeline. I also want to, something that I think is telling from the special prosecutor in this case. She said in the release, if any one of these 3 people, Alec Baldwin, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, or David Halls, had done their job, Halyna Hutchins would be alive today. It's that simple. The evidence clearly shows a pattern of criminal disregard for safety on the Rust film set. So next steps. Sometime this month, the DA's office here will formally file these charges, at which point summons will be issued for Gutierrez-Reed and Baldwin. They will then need to make a first appearance, think of that as an arraignment, and that will start the formal process. From there, there will be this preliminary hearing that will act in lieu of a grand jury where a judge will decide if there's enough evidence to move forward. That typically happens within 60 days of charges being filed here in New Mexico, and then you get into the further court process. That judge could decide there's enough evidence to move forward on one part of involuntary manslaughter versus the other. And there are some key differences. I can break those down for you. So there is, under New Mexico law, there is two classifications for involuntary manslaughter. It's a fourth-degree felony, punishable by up to 18 months in jail and a $5,000 fine. This could also include then a misdemeanor charge of negligent use of a firearm. The other charge would be involuntary manslaughter in commission of a lawful act. That would also be a fourth-degree felony, punishable by 18 months and the $5,000 fine. But this would include a firearm enhancement that has an added mandatory penalty because the firearm was involved. That would make this crime punishable by a mandatory 5-year sentence. So there are some elevated stakes here depending upon if this were to go to trial and how it's charged, what a jury would find.
All right, Jessica, before we wrap this up, I mean, you've heard all the details that Kris just relayed to us. It does seem that Alec Baldwin is in some serious legal jeopardy here.
This is both surprising and not. I was reading up on this a lot the last few days, and a number of criminal defense attorneys were saying, not only is there a lack of intent here, but we're not sure that we see that level of criminal negligence. On the other hand, what we saw from the prosecutor, I think, is that this was being planned for a while. She asked for a lot of money, which you would need because you would need this type of big prosecution. You wouldn't need it for for this particular district attorney's office to just continue business as usual. And I think she was really gearing up for a high profile and costly prosecution. So there's no doubt about it. Facing these charges is serious. It will be more serious, again, as you heard, if we pass that initial threshold where a judge says, yes, either one or both of these involuntary manslaughter charges go forward. At that point, I think it really will, it's just inescapable that Alec Baldwin will be facing these charges. And then he really faces the decision again of taking a plea if one is offered and on the table, or taking his chances with a jury where we know what he's going to argue. Basically, he was not culpable in any way. It was other people's responsibility. He was told cold gun, and there was frankly nothing else he will argue that he could have done.
Wow. Jessica Levinson, Kris Van Cleave, thank you so much.